Hello, this is the Exhausted Programmer. My name is Alexander, and today, let's improve our game. Last time we were here, we had this game that could be played simply with the WASD keys to move around. We showed how we can create these characters, put them in the world, and make them move. Today, let's try to make it look a little bit better by fixing the size of these characters, adding in a camera, and maybe getting rid of this background color for something a little bit more pleasing on the eyes. We can easily fix how small our characters are, plus have the character not be lost by going off the side of the screen by adding in a camera. We can add in the camera by selecting our player node and adding a new child node to this. Call it Camera 2D. You can search for it. Go ahead and create that. And now when we go to play our game, again, you can use F5 or the play button at the top. We now see that the camera follows the player character. If our player character is still too small, we can use zoom to get closer to the camera with our character or get the camera closer to our character. And again, if we run this, we can see that now we are larger on the screen. I do want to say that I am still learning how to capture video on my computer, and for some reason the gameplay looks a little bit more choppy in the video than it is on my screen. Try it for yourself to see how much smoother it can be when you actually play the game. The next thing that we're trying to do, or that I want to do, is to replace this ugly gray background with something a little bit more solid and more pleasing on the eye. To do that, we need to add another node to the world. This one is called Canvas Layer. We can go ahead and create that. And let's go ahead and create the color rec as a child to the canvas, because the important part of the canvas layer is made more obvious once we have the color rec as well. We can zoom in and we see that now we have this white square which covers our player and our enemy character. And so that's what the canvas layer is really useful to help, is that we can change its layer value. And we haven't talked about layers too much, but in a 2D game, everything can be thought of as being on different layers. And what we want is this to definitely be the lowest layer, so we can actually go down to -1. And now it is behind our character and our enemy. As far as the size, if we left it right here and we went to go run the game, we can kind of see a problem pop up, and that it doesn't cover the whole screen. It is just up in the top left. And so when we go back to our scene viewer, we can actually see that there is a large box. And we want to cover that whole box with this layer. So zoom out a little bit more, move, and there we go. If we make it just a little bit bigger, that just means the white box is going to go off the side a little bit, but that just means we're not going to see it ever. I'm even going to go so far as to just move this just a little bit up like that, just to avoid any weirdnesses on the edges. And now if we go and play the game, we will see that it is behind our character. And no matter how far up we go or left, which is not very clear, but I am moving, and we are not seeing the edge of it because it stays with the camera. So now let's start focusing on the sprites. With the white background, it's very clear that our sprites look a bit fuzzy. And as we zoomed in, it makes it even more obvious. We can fix that simply by going into Projects, Project Settings. We're going to look for the rendering section, so we can just minimize these until we get to rendering, which is right there, and we're looking at the textures. And if we change this default texturing filter to nearest, we can go ahead and close out, and we can already see that it looks better here. And when we go to play our game, it looks better there as well. But we can do more with our sprites, but that will require us to get out of Godot and start editing the sprites back in LibreSprite. To make just a couple of small improvements to our sprite, I just want to create two animations, one for when the character is moving and one when the character is not moving. These can be achieved by making small edits to the original sprite. I don't want to go too much into it all because at some point I would like to replace the stick figures with something a little bit more pleasing and more aesthetically connected to the world it's in, but we're making small changes as we go. So the first thing we want to do is to move the legs. If we want to create a simple walking animation, we can just lift up one leg and then lift up the other leg. So if we do this and just raise it up a little bit, make sure not to grab the body, but we can fix that real quick by doing that. And then we can export as a sprite sheet. I still don't know this enough to know how to export it as all of them together, but I think I can figure this out. All right, we can fix this later. Let's go ahead and call that sprite 3. And then if we undo our changes to get back to the default, we can then again cut out this leg and raise it up like that. Might even want to go ahead and make a little changes here. Honestly, just lower that a little bit. Like that, and then a change like that, and then again we can export that, and we have our two sprites for walking. We can also take this time to edit the sprite for the idle animation, which is going to be him standing and then again his legs lifted. So we can do it like that. Save it as, or export it as sprite 5. And from these, we can go ahead and create our animations in Godot. Before we jump back into Godot, make sure you add your sprites PNG files here. The import gets added by Godot once you try to access them. And then in our Godot window, we can go to our player or animated sprite. We can come down here and we can add a new animation, and we can call this one walking. And to make this the walking animation that we want, we can go ahead and add frames from sprite sheets. Sprite sheets are definitely something that I need to figure out a little bit more on how to use them in LibreSprite, but we can do this one at a time. This way, by opening up our first new sprite. Remember, this is looking for a sprite sheet which might have multiple sprites on it, but we're telling it there's only one row, one column that is one sprite. We can click on it and add that frame. A little delay. And then also we can add another frame that is our sprite 4. We can open this up. Again, one row, one column. Select the frame, add the frame. And now if we look at our character here, maybe I can make it look a little bit more obvious by hiding the collision shape 2D. We can hit play and we can see our character walking. If the walking is too fast, we can lower the frames per second. I like 3. And there's our character walking. Now, right now, that's all it would do throughout the whole game, no matter what we're doing. We'll fix that later, but let's go ahead and add in the other animation. So we can stop this, add another animation. We're going to call this one idle. And we're going to do a similar thing. We're going to start with the default sprite. 1 and 1 for this. And then we're going to add our second frame of the idle sprite. You could make a third frame and go 1, 2, 3, 2, 1 to get a more animated idle state, but again, we're usually focusing on minimum viable product here. And so if we add this, now we can see that the idle animation looks like that. Maybe we should definitely slow that down And it would be better if we made the body move instead of the legs, but we get the idea from this. So if we want the right animation to play at the right time, what we need to do is to add a little bit of code to our players. So on our player, we can go to scripts, make sure you're on the right one here. We need to see if we are moving. There's a few different ways we can do this, but one way is to look at the length of the velocity. If it is greater than 0, then we can say that we want the animated sprite 2D. We can use this $sign to get to that node. We can tell it to play a certain animation, and these are the 3 that we have saved, so that makes sense that these are the 3 options it gives us. And then if we're not walking, we want to be idling. So again, we can do animated sprite 2D, play, idle. We save this. And if you don't know exactly what's going on here, an if is a conditional statement that checks to see that the thing after it is true or false. That would be this part right here. Velocity.length. This length is a function of velocity, something that was given to us. We didn't define. Well, we did define it here, but you have to look in the documentation exactly what velocity has and what exactly length returns. But if we check its length that is greater than 0, we know we're moving. And if that is not true, we can then check other things. But in this case, it just says, if this is true, do this. If this is false, do this. If we go ahead and play this, we can see that our character is doing the weird leg moving animation, which again, we can fix by going back to our sprite animator and just moving the whole idle sprite down 2 pixels. But once we start moving, we start seeing that the legs are walking. And there we go. We now have a walking animation and an idle animation that triggers when we expect it to trigger. I hope this video shows that even though you start with a product that isn't the greatest, you can make small changes to get a lot of improvement out of it. In future videos, we can add in behavior for the enemy character, or we can add in environments, objects like trees or walls that will interact with the player and the enemy. We might even add in some action. I do have an idea of how I want this game to go, but I don't want to pin it down too much, as we can explore the different ways of moving this into different routes depending on personal preference. Obviously, I have to make a choice, and I will make that choice, but I want you to think how this could fit for whatever game idea you have in your head. If you have any questions about making games or anything else related to this channel, feel free to ask questions on this video or any video, and thank you for watching.